after having just watched all of the Indiana Jones films, plus some behind the scenes for them, most particularly the fourth one, I got to thinking that I needed to watch more Spielberg. Serendipitously, Jaws was in a semi-local theater for its 50th anniversary theatrical re-release at the exact time I was thinking about it. Quite literally got through that experience, said to myself, I want to watch more Steven Spielberg. Check my email, have a newsletter from my theater that said that Jaws was showing in one of the locations. I was like, heck yeah, I'm going to go to that. That may have been the fastest I've ordered theater tickets in a good long while. It's definitely up there for all time. So, for the first time watching what is by all means a seminal classic, to be in the theater was an opportunity I was absolutely not going to pass up, and it ended up being a very memorable experience and was super worth it. But was the movie worth it? Yes, the short answer is yes, of course watching Jaws was worth it. People largely do not overrate this movie. I mean, to be fair, I was by no means going in completely blind, but the last time I'd engaged with any content related to Jaws was far enough back that it didn't make any difference regarding my overall experience. So I went in, frankly, about as blind as I could, given the legacy of the film and how much it's within the general zeitgeist. But even so, there was enough I knew about the behind the scenes that I was able to enjoy catching the things I understood about the production of the film about just as much as the film itself. A fair warning for a 50-year-old movie, I will not be withholding spoilery material in this review, so let's just talk about my actual thoughts on the film. From a movie-making perspective, there are a number of things to say about Jaws, and foremost among those things is that it is a picture of two pieces, and that is the part that I really loved and the part that I didn't love quite as much. The first 2/3 of the film are incredible, truly incredible viewing experience. From the introduction holding a classic 70s charm, whatever charm the 70s happened to hold anyway, until the final fatal attack finally showing us Bruce in his unmasked glory, and an attack that sees our trio finally heading out to hunt the shark. Those 80 or so minutes are absolutely brilliant. I've heard some call Jaws a horror film, and the first 2/3 definitely explain why. The problems the crew had with Bruce as an animatronic shark led Spielberg to make the decision to straight up not show the shark in the first couple of acts so they wouldn't have to rely on it quite as much. And I think that is amongst the happiest of accidents to ever happen. Spielberg also runs with this in the blocking, pacing, and tone of character work to just continue building suspense. And truly, if there is one word to explain what makes Jaws click, that is suspense. What it is most successful at, in my opinion, is suspense. The inherent tension that pairs along with suspense, it does wonders. Watching the movie with my best friend, who is, by his own admittance, a pussy about horror movies, made the experience that much more fun. I knew, for example, of the jump scare from the ship found at sea, and it still got me, mind you, in case anybody might assume it didn't age well. And I didn't even tell my friend that it was there until it about launched him into the ceiling. That was a pretty entertaining experience. Spielberg and the writers really made the best of their situation and created an enduring legacy of terror with regard to sharks and the ocean, open water in general, and it came primarily through Bruce not even really being in the movie that much. I also broadly enjoyed seeing the style of arguments and deliberation of actual characters in the first two acts, whether that be the small town stuff or the actual characters that we follow. Roy Schneider's character, for example, taking as much action as he can and is allowed to, is a mood. By the way, he totally should have resisted the accusations applied to him by the mother of the boy that the shark killed. The mayor was literally right there. He totally could have just said, you're right, I did know about the shark, but this guy didn't let me close the beaches. That would have just been a hilarious karma. But either way, I found myself genuinely empathetic to Brody's plight and that of the towns. Having an implicit antagonist in the mayor was frustrating in just the right ways for the purpose of the film, and that kind of translated as well to the shark, as much as that probably doesn't make sense saying it aloud. Furthermore, introducing Quint's character in the first act before he is, actually hired for the final act is such a simple thing that I just appreciated so much. I feel like if this movie were made in relatively recent years, not 50 years ago, the writers wouldn't even bother with Quint until he needed to be hired and that he'd just be some random dude joining in for the third act. But instead, you get to become familiar with his vibe and kind of tangentially there, sort of, long before he actually becomes important. Like I said, it's such a simple thing, but it is also indicative of an excellent writing philosophy that undergirds the entire film. And to add to this line of praise, Richard Dreyfuss. What brilliant casting for this character. Probably my favorite character in the movie. I don't know why he strikes so true for me, but something just clicked in place with him. He made for the best part of the second act for sure, and probably the most entertaining part of the third act. Speaking of the second act, the on-screen chemistry between Hooper and Brody is excellent. I personally got a hell of a kick out of the two of them yelling, especially at the mayor about closing the beach. That was a very entertaining scene. But I suppose that'll probably take me to one general stylistic decision that didn't fully click with me, and that was characters talking over each other just so much. Though the aforementioned example of Hooper and Brody yelling at the mayor and kind of talking over one another in the course of doing that made for a really entertaining scene where you don't actually need to know what specifically either one of them is saying. It's the general gist of the scene that comes through and makes that work. There are plenty of times where this kind of talking over one another, it makes following what anybody's saying very difficult at frequent times throughout the movie, seemingly to no real end in most cases that I could personally determine. An example would be the first time that Jaws clues us into this being a stylistic decision, and that was early in the movie when Brody gets a phone call at home while his wife is helping one of their kids in the kitchen. You can hear both the phone call and the others clearly. So clearly, in fact, that both kind of become muddled. It's hard to pay attention to one over the other. I wasn't super into this, and this kind of thing happens a lot in this movie, a little bit too often, and it is my only major complaint about the first two acts. And lest I forget, though it might be relatively common knowledge by now, that Bruce, the mechanical shark used on set during the filming of Jaws, was not very cooperative. This was a big part of the reason why it doesn't appear in most of the movie, but what the crew did get with the shark is so good, and I have to commend it, leading all the way up to eating Quint out of his own boat. Lovely execution with the direction between the actors against the shark at every turn. Unfortunately, however, I do think the third act runs over long, and I have to wonder if most of this is due to, ironically, overusing the shark, or at least overusing the shots where he managed to work, or something like that. I don't know, I just feel like waiting for Bruce to come round to be harpooned with barrels 3 times as opposed to, say, just 2 times was a little bit overkill. It meant the same cycle of the third act pace just kind of repeated a couple times, and one of those times was a time too many, and eventually just felt a little bit too long to me. Add to that a drunken night spent with monologues that lasted 1.5 million years between our, by that point, 3 main and only characters, which itself could have been cut by a few minutes, means that the final act in totality, the last 40 minutes or so, could have been a solid 15 minutes shorter, and the film, in my opinion, would have been better off for it. I legitimately got a bit bored in the third act, which seems pretty firmly the opposite of the intended effect. Besides this moderate blunder of sorts, the structure of the film is very good. Spielberg definitely showed a ton of inherent skill here. I reiterate what I said when I watched the Indiana Jones movies recently, and that is that I really need to watch more of this man's work. I have seen embarrassingly little. Is there anybody out there who watched Jaws for the first time in theaters with this 50th anniversary re-release like I did? If so, how did you react? I would sure love to know. My personal take comes down to really loving those first 2 acts, but finding the last act a little too drawn out. Even so, the foundations of solid direction, great writing, fantastic tonal decisions, and a very down-to-earth conceit to keep everything together, alongside great acting, made for a wonderful time. I give Jaws 4 out of 5, with the everybody talking over everyone else problem, and my personal qualms with the third act being the reason it's not higher. I am very glad I went to see this, and so very glad I had the opportunity to, especially at the time I was most excited to watch more Spielberg. The timing ended up being perfect, and that alone makes me pretty happy. I've now seen 5 of his 37 pictures, including pre-theatrical work and a couple of shorts that I intend to watch. Still got a long road ahead of me, apparently. But now I've seen Jaws in 4K in the theater, and I don't think I ever need to watch it again. I think this experience was definitely good enough for me. But that's just my take. Be sure to let me know yours down below. For now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.